The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Zixathara limped to the witness stand. Her once proud carapace was cracked and scarred, dark green fluid still seeping from wounds that refused to heal. Where her lower left arm should have been, a crude mechanical device clicked and whirred with each movement. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they looked at her. Zixathara had been beautiful once, by Keithvar standards. Her shell had gleamed like polished emerald, and her 4 arms had moved with the deadly grace of a born warrior. Now she looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. The assembled aliens had never seen a Kethvar warrior in such condition. The Kethvar were known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable fighters. They conquered worlds for breakfast and crushed rebellions before lunch. "State your name and rank for the record," said Council Prime Velthos. His ethereal form flickered slightly, showing his discomfort with the situation. Zixathara, former battle captain of the 47th Assault Legion, Hegemony Military Command, she replied. Her voice came out as a series of clicks and whistles, translated by the Council's universal language system. Even through the translation, her pain was clear. "You are the sole survivor of your Legion's encounter with the human species on the world they call New Haven. Is this correct?" "Yes." The word came out flat and empty. Velthos floated higher in his chair. Around the great hall, representatives of 47 different species leaned forward. Most had never heard of humans before today. Those who had considered them a joke, a primitive species barely worthy of notice. "Tell us what happened." Zixathara closed her compound eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they seemed to be looking at something far away and terrible. "The humans were supposed to be easy," she began. "Command told us they were a young species, barely past nuclear weapons, no real military, no advanced technology, just farmers and miners scattered across a few dozen worlds." A few council members made sounds that might have been laughter. The idea of the mighty Kethvar being troubled by farmers was amusing to them. "Our intelligence said New Haven had 50,000 civilians and maybe 2,000 soldiers. We brought 12 dreadnoughts and 200 support ships. The 47th Legion was 10,000 of our finest warriors. It should have been over in a day." "But it was not," Velthos observed. "No, it was not." Zixathara's mechanical arm twitched. The memory was clearly painful. "We followed standard procedure. We arrived in system and sent the usual message. Surrender peacefully, and you will be relocated to reservation worlds. Continue to resist and face complete annihilation. Every species we have ever encountered chose surrender once they saw our fleet." "And the humans?" The human commander was named Jake Collins, an old male with gray hair and scars on his face. We expected him to plead for mercy or try to negotiate. Instead, his response was 3 words: "Come and take it." The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. Several species had never heard of anyone responding to hegemony demands with such casual defiance. "We thought it was a translation error," Zixathara continued. "So we sent the message again. This time we included visual records of other worlds we had conquered. Burning cities, broken armies, the usual images that convince populations to surrender." "What was their response?" Zixathara made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "The humans sent us a video message." Collins stood in front of his command center, surrounded by his officers. Behind them we could see human civilians, males, females, even their young ones, all working together to build defenses, and they were singing. Singing? Some kind of human war song. Collins looked directly into the camera and said something that still haunts my dreams. "We know who you are. We know what you've done to other worlds. But you do not know us. You do not know what humans do when you threaten our families. You are about to learn." The chamber was dead silent now. Even the most skeptical council members were paying attention. Then the strangest thing happened, Zixathara continued. A human female appeared beside Collins. Her name was Lisa Park. She was not a soldier. She was some kind of scientist or doctor. She looked at our camera and smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. "A smile frightened you?" asked Counselor Rixtall, his tentacles writhing with amusement. Zixathara turned her damaged gaze toward him. Human smiles are not like ours. When we show pleasure, it is simple emotion. When humans smile in the face of certain death, it means something else entirely. It means they have accepted that they will die, and they have decided to make it cost you everything. The amusement died in Rixtal's tentacles. Dr. Park said only one sentence before the transmission ended. "We will make you remember us." Then the channel went dark. Velthos processed this information. "So you began your assault?" We gave them 24 hours to reconsider. Standard protocol. During that time, our sensors detected massive activity on the planet's surface. We assumed they were trying to evacuate or hide. They were not. They were preparing to fight. Not just the soldiers. Everyone. Our surveillance showed human children, some who could barely walk, helping to carry supplies. Elderly humans who should have been in medical care were working alongside young warriors. We had never seen anything like it. Zixathara paused to adjust her mechanical arm. The device sparked slightly. When the deadline passed, we sent one final message. Collins appeared on screen again. This time he was not alone. The entire human population was behind him, all 50,000 of them. They had gathered in the colony's main square. To surrender? To say goodbye to each other, and to make us a promise. The council waited. Collins spoke for all of them. He said, "You can kill us all, you probably will, but we will hurt you so badly that you will think twice before you ever threaten another human world. We are not just fighting for New Haven. We are fighting for every human who will come after us. Remember our names. Remember what we cost you." Zixathara looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member. Then every single human on that world, soldiers and civilians, young and old, raised their voices together in that same war song we had heard before. 50,000 voices singing about death and glory while our fleet prepared to destroy them. She leaned forward in her chair. That was when I knew we had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to stop what was coming. The council chamber remained silent as Zixathara continued her testimony. Her mechanical arm made small whirring sounds as she adjusted her position. "The orbital bombardment was supposed to begin at dawn on the third day," she said. "Standard procedure called for destroying military targets first, then giving civilians one final chance to surrender before we leveled their cities." Council Prime Velthos floated slightly lower. "But you did not begin with orbital strikes?" "No. Command decided to make an example of New Haven. They wanted other human worlds to see what happened when species defied the hegemony. So instead of bombardment, we would land ground forces and take the planet intact." Zixathara's compound eyes seemed to focus on something only she could see. I was part of the first wave. 5,000 warriors in assault pods dropping directly onto their primary settlement. Our intelligence said the humans had built basic defensive walls around their colony. Nothing that could stop Kethvar assault troops. She paused, her breathing becoming labored. When our pods hit the ground, we expected to face a few hundred frightened defenders hiding behind makeshift barriers. What we found instead was impossible. Impossible how? The entire colony had been transformed into a fortress. Not just the walls. Every building, every street, every open space had been turned into a killing ground. But that was not the impossible part. Zixathara stood up slowly, her damaged body protesting the movement. The impossible part was that they had done it in 3 days. 48,000 civilians and 2,000 soldiers had completely redesigned their city in 72 hours. Structures that should have taken months to build were everywhere. Defensive positions that would have challenged our best military engineers appeared overnight. Councillor Rixtal shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps their technology was more advanced than you believed." "No, we scanned everything. Basic human tools, simple explosives, primitive weapons. But they used them in ways we had never seen. They turned farming equipment into weapons. They made bombs from fertilizer and household chemicals. Children who should have been hiding were instead carrying ammunition to fighting positions." The mechanical arm clicked as Zixathara pointed toward the viewing screen. "Show them the recordings from my helmet camera," she requested. The screen flickered to life, showing the view from a Kethvar warrior's perspective. The image was shaky and filled with static from battle damage, but clear enough to see. In the recording, Kethvar assault troops advanced through what had once been a peaceful colony street. Now it was a maze of concrete barriers, metal spikes, and hidden firing positions. The buildings on both sides had been modified with gun ports and reinforced walls. This was Main Street, Zixthera explained. 3 days earlier, it had been a normal market area where humans bought food and clothing. They had turned it into a tunnel of death. The recording showed Kethvar warriors moving cautiously forward. Suddenly, explosions erupted from multiple directions. The camera shook violently as the warrior wearing it was knocked down. 47 of my warriors died in the first 30 seconds, Zixthera said quietly. But that was not the worst part. The camera view stabilized, showing human defenders emerging from hidden positions. They moved with coordination that spoke of intensive training. But their equipment was clearly improvised. The worst part was their faces. The recording zoomed in on a human male who could not have been older than 20. He was bleeding from several wounds and carrying a weapon that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. But he was smiling. We had fought dozens of species across the galaxy, Zixthera continued. When beings face overwhelming force, they show fear, anger, or desperation. Humans showed joy. They were happy to be fighting us. The recording continued, showing more human defenders. An elderly female who moved with difficulty but handled explosives with expert skill. A young male who had lost his left eye but continued operating a heavy weapon with deadly accuracy. All of them had that same terrible smile. We called for reinforcements, Zixthera said. Command sent another 3,000 warriors. They died just as quickly. The screen showed a new scene, the interior of what had been a shopping center. The humans had converted it into a multi-level fortress with interconnected firing, positions and concealed passages. This is where I met Dr. Lisa Park for the second time. The recording showed a human female in a blood-stained laboratory coat. She was kneeling beside wounded human defenders, treating their injuries while explosions shook the building around them. She was a medical doctor, Zixthera explained. She should have been hiding in a shelter or trying to escape. Instead, she was in the middle of the heaviest fighting, saving the lives of her people so they could continue to kill mine. The camera view moved closer to Dr. Park. She looked up as the Kethvar warrior approached, and her face showed no fear, only that same disturbing smile. She spoke to me, Zixthera said. Even though she knew I was there to kill her, she spoke to me in perfect Kethvar language. The council members leaned forward. Very few species bothered to learn Kethvar speech. What did she say? Zixthera's voice became very quiet. She said, "Your people made a mistake coming here. We studied you. We learned your language, your tactics, your weaknesses. You know nothing about us. That is why you are going to lose." The recording showed Dr. Park returning to her patients as if the armed Kethvar warrior was no threat at all. She continued treating wounded humans while battle raged around her. Then she did something that broke every rule of warfare I understood. The screen showed Dr. Park pulling a small device from her coat. It looked harmless, like a medical instrument. She detonated a localized electromagnetic pulse. It disabled my warrior's weapons and armor systems. But instead of killing him while he was helpless, she went back to treating her wounded. Zixthera turned to face the council directly. She made us helpless, then ignored us, as if we were not worth her attention, as if healing her people was more important than fighting us. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in darkness. That was when I began to understand what we were truly facing. Zixthera said, "This was not a battle between armies. This was the entire population that had decided to resist with everything they had. Every human on that world, from the youngest child to the oldest adult, was part of their military. Council Prime Velthos processed this information slowly. How many casualties did you suffer in the first day? 8,000 warriors dead or wounded. Nearly our entire landing force, and the humans? Zixthera's mechanical arm sparked again. Fewer than 200. But every human who died took multiple Kethvar with them, and the survivors just smiled and kept fighting." Zixthera's voice grew quieter as she continued her testimony. The council chamber was so silent that the only sounds were the soft humming of the translation systems and the mechanical whirring of her prosthetic arm. On the second day, Command sent the entire reserve force, she began. 15,000 fresh Kethvar warriors plus armor support and air cover. We had never needed so many troops to take a single human settlement. She paused, her damaged carapace reflecting the chamber's lights and fractured patterns. The humans had used the night to rebuild their defenses. Somehow they had made them stronger. We found new obstacles, new weapons, new tactical positions that had not been there the day before. It was as if the entire colony was alive and growing more dangerous by the hour. Council Prime Velthos leaned forward. Were they receiving outside help? No, our sensors would have detected any ships or supply drops. These were the same 50,000 humans, working with the same basic materials they had always had. But they were using them in ways that defied logic. Zixthara activated the viewing screen again. New footage appeared, more chaotic and violent than before. This recording is from the second assault on Sector 7. Watch carefully. The screen showed Cathvar troops advancing through a residential area. The houses looked normal from the outside, but as the warriors moved between them, the buildings themselves began to attack. The humans had rigged their own homes as weapons, Zixthara explained. Walls that exploded outward. Floors that collapsed into spike pits. Ceilings that dropped nets filled with explosives. They had turned their neighborhood into a giant trap. The recording showed a Kethvar warrior approaching what looked like an abandoned house. As he reached the door, the entire structure collapsed inward, taking 3 more warriors with it. But from the rubble, a human emerged, wounded but still fighting. That was Ryan Scott. A human male, perhaps 30 years old. He was a maintenance worker before the war. He had never been a soldier. The screen zoomed in on Scott as he engaged multiple Kethvar warriors with nothing but a metal pipe and some kind of chemical spray. His movements were clumsy compared to trained fighters, but he fought with a ferocity that stunned the aliens. He held that intersection for 6 hours, Zixthara said. Alone. We shot him 17 times, but he would not stay down. Every time we thought he was dead, he would get back up and continue fighting. The footage showed Scott taking hit after hit, bleeding from multiple wounds, but never stopping his attack. His face was a mask of pain and determination. When we finally overwhelmed him, he was barely alive. Any rational being would have surrendered or died. Instead, he pulled the pins from 4 grenades and tried to take my squad with him. The screen flashed white as the explosives detonated. He failed to kill us, but he delayed our advance long enough for more human defenders to reach the area. That intersection cost us 200 warriors and 3 hours of precious time. Zixthara changed the recording to show a different area. This is Amy White. She was an engineer who designed water treatment systems, a civilian with no military training. The screen showed a human female working frantically inside what looked like an apartment building. She was connecting cables and devices while explosions shook the structure around her. She had converted her building into a bomb, not a simple explosive, something much more sophisticated. She calculated the exact charge needed to bring down her building and the 2 structures beside it. The recording showed Kethvar troops entering the building's ground floor, advancing cautiously through what had been a lobby. She waited until 300 of our warriors were inside. Then she triggered the device. The screen showed the building collapsing in a controlled demolition. The structure folded inward, crushing the Kethvar forces while leaving the surrounding buildings intact. But she did not escape before detonating it, Zixthara continued. She stayed inside to make sure the timing was perfect. In the final transmission from her communicator, she could be heard laughing as the building came down. The council members shifted uncomfortably. The idea of someone laughing while dying in an explosion was deeply disturbing to most species. The worst case was Sergeant Dan Murphy. A new recording appeared, showing a human male in military uniform. He was older than the others, with gray hair and numerous scars that spoke of previous battles. Murphy was different from the civilian fighters. He was a professional soldier, but what he did went beyond anything in our military manuals. The footage showed Murphy defending a medical station where wounded humans were being treated. He was surrounded by at least 20 Kethvar warriors, vastly outnumbered. Watch his left arm, Zixthara instructed. The recording showed Murphy taking a direct hit from a Kethvar plasma weapon. His left arm was severed at the shoulder, spinning away in a spray of blood. Any normal being would have gone into shock and collapsed. Murphy picked up his severed arm and used it as a club. The screen showed the impossible sight of a human warrior beating alien. Soldiers with his own dismembered limb while blood poured from his wound. He fought for another 20 minutes in that condition. When he finally fell, he had killed 8 Kethvar warriors and wounded 12 more. Even as he lay dying, he was still trying to attack us with his remaining hand. Zixthara turned off the screen and faced the council directly. These were not isolated incidents. This was how every human fought. They did not understand the concept of hopeless situations. When cornered with no escape, they did not surrender, they became more dangerous. She began pacing, her mechanical arm clicking with each step. We tried everything. Tear gas had no effect. They had improvised masks. Sonic weapons were useless. They fought while deaf and disoriented. We even tried psychological warfare, broadcasting the sounds of dying humans to break their morale. What was their response? They broadcast back. But not sounds of fear or grief. They sent us recordings of human children singing that same war song we had heard on the first day. While their city burned around them, while their friends and family died, they sang about victory and death with equal joy. Zixthera stopped pacing and looked directly at Velthos. By the end of the second day, we had suffered 12,000 casualties. The humans had lost perhaps 1,000, but every human death seemed to make the survivors fight harder. They were not being weakened by loss. They were being strengthened by it. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. On the third morning, Command made the decision to begin orbital bombardment. We would destroy the colony from space rather than continue to lose ground troops. But something prevented this. Zixthera's mechanical arm began to spark more frequently. Dr. Lisa Park prevented it, the same human female who had been treating wounded in the shopping center. She had been busy during the 2 days of ground fighting. Doing what? Converting the colony's fusion reactors into a weapon that could reach our ships in orbit. The council erupted in startled chatter. Several species had never heard of such a thing being possible. She turned civilian power plants into orbital defense systems. Worse, she turned them into a trap. The mechanical whirring of Zixthera's prosthetic arm grew louder as she approached the most painful part of her testimony. Her compound eyes seemed to lose focus, staring at memories that haunted her dreams. The orbital strike was scheduled to begin at dawn on the fourth day, she continued. Admiral Crixtel positioned all 12 dreadnoughts in perfect bombardment formation. The colony's shields were failing. Victory was certain. She paused, her breathing becoming labored. Dr. Lisa Park had other plans. The viewing screen activated again, showing the fleet from the perspective of the flagship's bridge cameras. 12 massive Kethvar dreadnoughts hung in space like dark stars, their weapons charging for the final assault. At exactly dawn, our sensors detected massive energy spikes from the planet's surface. We assumed the humans were trying some desperate last defense with their remaining shield generators. The recording showed the bridge crew working calmly at their stations, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Admiral Crixtel stood at the center, preparing to give the order to fire. Then the surface of New Haven began to glow. The screen showed the colony world suddenly blazing with light, as if a new sun was being born on its surface. Dr. Park had connected all 6 fusion reactors in a series configuration. She had turned the planet's power grid into a single massive directed energy weapon. The council members leaned forward, struggling to understand the implications. That should have destroyed the planet, observed Councillor Rixtel. It should have, but human engineers do not think like the rest of us. Park had calculated the exact power output needed to disable our ships without destroying the planet. She had turned nuclear fusion into a precision instrument. The recording showed beams of pure energy reaching up from the planet's surface, striking 6 of the dreadnoughts simultaneously. The massive ships went dark instantly, their power systems overloaded and their weapons offline. 6 dreadnoughts disabled in 30 seconds, Zixthera said quietly. But that was not the worst part. What was the worst part? The worst part was Dr. Park's transmission immediately after the attack. The screen showed a communication from the planet's surface. Dr. Park appeared, standing in what remained of her laboratory. The room was filled with smoke and sparks from overloaded equipment, but she looked calm and satisfied. She said, "Good morning, Admiral. I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. I still have enough power for 5 more shots and your remaining ships are in perfect range. Would you like to surrender now or shall we continue?" The chamber fell silent. The idea of 50,000 humans making surrender demands to a hegemony fleet was unthinkable. Admiral Crixtal was so shocked that he actually considered her offer. Zixthera continued. But then our long-range sensors detected new contacts approaching the system. The recording shifted to show the tactical display. A single ship was approaching, tiny compared to the massive Kethvar fleet. 1 human vessel against 6 operational dreadnoughts and 200 support ships. We thought it was a supply ship trying to evacuate the colony. Zixthera's mechanical arm began sparking more violently. It was the UES Liberty, commanded by Captain Beth Morgan, a heavy cruiser with a crew of 800 humans. The screen showed the approaching ship. It was sleek and functional, clearly built for war, but hopelessly outnumbered. Captain Morgan opened communications with a message that still gives me nightmares. The recording showed a human female in a crisp military uniform. She had short gray hair and scars on her face that spoke of many battles, but her eyes were calm and confident. She said, "This is Captain Beth Morgan of the United Earthship Liberty. You have attacked a human colony and killed human civilians. This is where we make our stand. All ships, this is your only warning. Leave this system now or we will send you home in pieces." The council chamber erupted in nervous chatter. The audacity of the statement was beyond comprehension. A single ship threatening an entire fleet, mused Velthos. What happened next? Admiral Krickstall ordered all remaining ships to destroy the Liberty. 200 vessels converging on one target. It should have lasted seconds. The recording showed the massive Kethvar fleet turning toward the tiny human ship, weapons charging and missiles launching. But Captain Morgan was not planning a conventional battle. The screen showed the Liberty accelerating directly toward the fleet, not away from it. As Kethvar weapons reached for it, the human ship performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. She used our disabled dreadnoughts as cover, flying between them and using their hulls to block our weapons fire, but that was just the beginning. The recording became chaotic as the Liberty engaged multiple targets simultaneously. The human ship's weapons were not as powerful as Kethvar guns, but they were used with devastating precision. "Watch this," Zixthera said, pointing to the screen. The Liberty approached one of the disabled dreadnoughts and fired directly at its main reactor. The explosion that followed destroyed 2 nearby support ships and damaged 3 others. She was using our own ships as weapons against us. The battle continued, with the Liberty darting between the massive Kethvar vessels like a predator hunting in a herd. Each attack was perfectly calculated to cause maximum damage with minimal risk. "How is this possible?" asked Velthos. "One ship against so many?" Captain Morgan had studied our tactics for decades. She knew exactly how Kethvar fleets operated, what our weaknesses were, how our commanders thought. She had turned our strength into our weakness. The recording showed the Liberty ramming a damaged cruiser into a healthy dreadnought, destroying both ships while somehow avoiding serious damage itself. But the most terrifying part was not her tactics, it was her crew. The screen showed internal views of the Liberty during the battle. Human crew members worked at their stations while explosions rocked the ship around them. Several stations were on fire, but the humans continued their duties as if nothing was wrong. Their chief engineer was Tom Brady. When the engine room was breached and filled with toxic gas, he put on a breathing mask and continued working. When the main power conduit exploded and severed his leg, he crawled to the backup controls and restored power while bleeding to death. The recording showed Brady dragging himself across the engine room floor, leaving a trail of blood as he reached the emergency controls. The weapons officer was Kate Miller. When her station exploded and set her uniform on fire, she put out the flames and kept firing. She was burned over 60% of her body, but she never stopped targeting our ships. The screen showed Miller at her post, her face and arms covered in burns, calmly selecting targets while medics tried to treat her wounds. And Captain Morgan herself was wounded 3 times during the battle. Shrapnel from a hull breach, a broken arm from a console explosion, and a head injury that left her partially blind. She commanded the ship for 6 more hours in that condition. The recording showed the final moments of the battle. The Liberty was heavily damaged, venting atmosphere and debris, but still fighting. Only 3 Kethvar ships remained operational. Captain Morgan's final transmission was to the planet's surface, Zixthera said quietly. The screen showed Morgan on the Liberty's bridge. Blood ran down her face from her head wound and her left arm hung useless at her side. But she was smiling, that same terrifying human smile. She said, "New Haven, this is Liberty. The sky is clear. Tell Earth we were here. Tell them we held the line." The recording ended with the Liberty exploding as its reactor overloaded, taking the last Kethvar dreadnought with it. Zixthara turned to face the council, her mechanical arm now sparking continuously. "That was how I lost my arm and my legion, in the explosion of a human ship whose captain chose to die rather than retreat." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. And the colony? New Haven survived. 50,000 humans had defeated the entire 47th Assault Legion, and most of the fleet. Dr. Park's fusion weapon had disabled our ships, and Captain Morgan had destroyed the rest. Zixathera looked directly at each council member. But that was not the end of the horror. That was when I learned the truth about what we were really facing. Zixathera stood in silence for several moments, her mechanical arm finally quiet. The sparking had stopped, but her damaged carapace still reflected the chamber's lights like broken mirrors. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of fear that made even the bravest council members uncomfortable. After the battle ended, I was found floating in the wreckage of my command ship, she began. Badly wounded, barely alive. The humans could have left me to die in space. Instead, they rescued me. Council Prime Velthos leaned forward. They took you prisoner? No. They took me to their medical facility and saved my life. The viewing screen activated one final time, showing the interior of a human hospital. The scene was clean and bright, very different from the war-torn colony they had seen before. Dr. Lisa Park treated my injuries personally. The same human who had destroyed half our fleet was now working to keep me alive. She spent 3 days performing surgery to repair my damaged organs and fit me with this prosthetic arm. Zixathera raised her mechanical limb, the crude device clicking softly. While I recovered, I had access to human information networks. I thought I could gather intelligence about their military capabilities. What I discovered instead was the truth about what we had really attacked. The screen showed human data files scrolling past, military records, population statistics, industrial reports. New Haven was not a major human colony. It was a frontier settlement, barely 5 years old. The 2,000 soldiers we fought were not elite troops. They were a basic garrison force with standard equipment. Several council members made sounds of disbelief. The civilians were exactly what they appeared to be: farmers, miners, engineers, teachers. They had no special military training, no advanced weapons, no secret technology. Then how did they defeat your legion? Zixathera's compound eyes focused on something beyond the chamber walls. Because every human is a potential warrior. Their entire species is built around the concept that anyone might need to fight at any moment. They call it total war, the idea that every member of their society is part of their military whether they wear a uniform or not. The screen showed images of human settlements across dozens of worlds. Each one looked peaceful and civilian, but Zixathera had learned to see the hidden military infrastructure. Every human colony has defensive plans. Every civilian knows how to use weapons and build explosives. Every child learns tactics and strategy as part of their basic education. They disguise military training as games and sports. She pointed to footage of human children playing what looked like harmless games. This appears to be recreational activity, but watch their movements. These games teach small unit tactics, weapons handling, and battlefield communication. By the time a human reaches adulthood, they have been unconsciously trained for war. The implications settled over the council like a cold shadow. How many worlds do the humans control? Asked Velthos quietly. Over 200 confirmed settlements. But that is not the frightening part. What is the frightening part? The frightening part is that they have been preparing for galactic contact for 300 years. The screen showed historical human documents, military plans, technological development records, strategic analyses. They detected our exploration probes decades ago. They have been studying us, learning our languages, analyzing our tactics. While we dismissed them as primitive, they were building a civilization designed specifically to fight us. Zixathera activated a new file, showing human population statistics. New Haven had 50,000 people. The total human population across all worlds is over 40 billion. If 50,000 farmers and miners could destroy the 47th Assault Legion, what could 40 billion prepared humans do to our entire military? The chamber fell deadly silent. But the numbers are not the worst part, Zixathera continued. The worst part is their psychology. Humans do not fight to win territory or resources. They fight to protect their way of life. Every battle is existential to them. Every conflict is total war. She turned to face the council directly. We have conquered 47 species across the galaxy. All of them surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. All of them accepted defeat when victory became impossible. Humans do not understand these concepts. The screen showed the final message from Captain Morgan aboard the Dying Liberty. Tell them we were here. Tell them we held the line. She was not trying to win an unwinnable battle. She was sending a message to other humans that this is how they should fight. Die before retreat. Fight until the last breath. Make the enemy pay for every inch. Zixthera began pacing again, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. I spent 6 months recovering on New Haven. During that time, I watched how humans live. They are not a warrior species like the Kethvar. They prefer peace and cooperation. But when threatened, they become something else entirely. What do you mean? I watched a human female named Sarah teach children how to read and write. She was gentle and patient, devoted to education and knowledge. But when a wild animal threatened one of her students, she killed it with her bare hands without hesitation. The screen showed security footage of the incident, a human teacher transforming from educator to killer in seconds, then returning to her lesson as if nothing had happened. Every human has this capacity. They can switch from peaceful civilian to deadly warrior instantly, then switch back just as quickly. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered because they hide their true nature until the moment they need it. Zixthera stopped pacing and looked directly at Velthos. While I was recovering, more human ships arrived at New Haven. Not military vessels, civilian transport ships carrying supplies and volunteers to help rebuild. But I recognized the design patterns. What did you recognize? Those civilian ships had the same hull modifications as the Liberty. The same weapon mounts, the same armor plating, the same tactical systems. Every human merchant vessel is a warship in disguise. The implications were staggering. If human civilian ships were actually military vessels, their true fleet strength was impossible to calculate. The humans have been playing a centuries-long deception, Zixthera continued. They appear weak and divided with multiple governments and competing interests. But beneath that facade is a unified species preparing for galactic war. She activated one final image on the screen, a human diplomatic document. While I was on New Haven, this message arrived from Earth. It was addressed to the Galactic Council, requesting formal diplomatic contact. The document appeared to be a standard first contact protocol, polite and peaceful. But I had learned to read human subtext. This was not a request for peaceful contact. This was a warning that humanity was ready to take their place on the galactic stage, and they expected to be treated as equals. Zixthera faced the assembled aliens one last time. I am the sole survivor of the 47th Assault Legion because the humans allowed me to survive. They wanted me to bring this message to the Council. Humanity cannot be conquered because they do not fear death. They cannot be negotiated with from a position of strength because they recognize no authority greater than their own survival. She raised her mechanical arm, the prosthetic device gleaming in the chamber's lights. They gave me this replacement limb as a gift, not from kindness but as a reminder. Every time I move this arm, I remember what happens when you threaten humans. The chamber remained silent as the weight of her testimony settled over the council. What do you recommend? Asked Velthos finally. Send diplomats, not soldiers. Offer alliance, not conquest. Because if we make enemies of humanity, we will all burn together. They have spent 3 centuries preparing for that war, and they welcome it. Zixthera began walking toward the chamber's exit, her mechanical arm clicking with each step. The 47th Assault Legion learned too late that humans do not just fight to win. They fight to ensure that anyone who threatens them remembers the price forever. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back. They are coming to this chamber tomorrow, a diplomatic mission led by Ambassador John Hayes. They know about this testimony. They know about this council. They have always known. The door closed behind her, leaving the council in stunned silence. In the viewing gallery above, a figure in human clothing watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Ambassador John Hayes had been in the chamber all along, listening to every word. As he stood to leave, he spoke quietly into a communication device. Mission Control, this is Hayes. The message has been delivered. They understand the situation now. The response was immediate. Acknowledged, Ambassador. Welcome to the galactic community. Hayes smiled, that same terrible human smile that had haunted Zixthera's dreams, and walked away into the corridors of power, ready to negotiate humanity's place among the stars from a position of strength earned through blood and sacrifice on a small colony world called New Haven.